and minimize that. Okay. Oh, there's another person. If you haven't had a chance to go ahead and just tell me a couple people in class that you'd like to work with, today I'm gonna do random breakout rooms, but I think I like to set it up so that there's a group of maybe 3 or 4 people in class that whenever we do group work, it's just sort of like a, default group that you can, that you feel like you can work with these people. I don't really assign any group projects or anything, but sometimes I'll have you sit in a group and talk about what we're reading or start an assignment together, and then that way you can work on it through the week. So just take a minute and go to the chat and send me a message of anybody in class that you think that you'd like to work with in that kind of a scenario. If it doesn't matter to you, then you can just say it doesn't matter to me. But hey, go away. But if you do have a couple people, then I'll make groups where you're comfortable, chatting and working with people. So if you haven't had a chance to do that, go ahead and take a minute to do that. And we're going to start with the Blackboard entry for today. So if you have your Blackboard open, then that's going to be the starting point today for week 3. It sounds like a lot, and then it sounds like so little. I don't know. 3 sounds like an accomplishment, but then it also sounds like, oh, we have 12 more weeks to go. I don't know. While people are finishing putting their suggestions in the chat, I want to tell you that yesterday we had staff development. And one of the things that the principal was talking about was the decision to go to hybrid at the end of September or to extend the 100% virtual into October. I don't know if you know, but there's a couple of Valley school districts that have already said that they're extending through the end of October, McAllen and Mission. So the thought right now is that most of the school districts in the Valley will probably follow suit, but the official word from the district is that in 2 weeks, or maybe more like a week and a half now, they're going to send out another survey. So the reason I'm telling you that is to keep an eye out. What they want to do is they want to figure out how many people would want to go to hybrid. Hybrid is when you go to school, like the school building, 1 day a week or 2 days a week, and the other days you're asynchronous at home. And they're going to rotate that. So like half of the people that want to be on hybrid will go on Mondays, and they're going to keep the same schedule. And then the other half would go on Wednesdays. And then for Tuesday, Thursday, it would be the same thing. So I guess you might end up going 2 days a week. And then the rest of the time you're at home. So hybrid just means you're kind of doing both. So they're going to send out a survey to parents, and I think you guys too, about what your preferences are. And about that same time, they're going to make a decision about whether we're going to move to hybrid at the end of the month or extend hybrid to the end of October, because they can petition the state for 4 more weeks. So I just thought I'd let you know that's what where we are with that. That's what the principal was talking about yesterday. I don't know. I feel like a lot of times people don't tell y'all stuff. And so I want to make sure that I'm communicating with you. And if you have questions about that, I'll answer whatever I know. But right now that's still up in the air. But do make sure that you keep an eye out for that survey, because I think that's the way they're going to get information about their decision making. So right now they think about 30% of the students would want to do hybrid based on a survey that they did in July. I think that's probably going to change a little bit now that we've started school, but anyway, so I'll give you, when I know that that's gone out, I'll give you a heads up or something like that, so that you can look for it and participate in that survey, because I think that's going to be an important gauge of how they make their decision. Are there any other, before I start with the lesson and stuff today, are there any other questions about what's going on with that sort of thing, like decisions that are being made or how things are working? Because I know we don't have a lot of information, but I do want you to have whatever information is available. Okay. I don't want you to feel like you're in the dark about things. I think sometimes all the adults make decisions and talk about stuff and they never really, you know, address you guys. So, all right, well, I'm going to switch over and we have some things to talk about in our course. I'm going to go over to the Blackboard. Week 3 is up in weekly modules. I usually try to put them up on Mondays. Yesterday I kind of waited until later in the day because I kind of felt like, oh, it's your day off. I don't want you to feel like you have to jump on and look at it when you get your notification. This week we're continuing with short fiction and we're going to be looking at character, setting, and then next week will be point of view. So we're kind of like just adding these elements in until at the end of this short fiction study, we'll be able to look at an entire piece of fiction with all of these pieces together. And there is a paper that you need to write. I think I'll be introducing that next week. It's a short paper. It's not a research paper. It's a response paper to a short piece of fiction. I'll let you, I think there's like 8 or 10 different pieces that I chose that you can choose from. And the goal of that is going to be work with the story sort of holistically. So that will be the sort of culminating activity with this unit. All right, so I already talked about Google Classroom. If you hadn't joined the class yet and you missed me asking about Google Classroom, I just wonder if it would be handy for you to have a little list of what's due, because I know that Google Classroom does that for you. So you can just kind of, if you give me feedback, you can email me or you can put it in a chat to me, or maybe it just doesn't even matter. If I don't hear from anybody, I'm not going to bother, but if it would help you to have the assignments there in addition to Blackboard, just so that you're organized, then you can let me know. I do want to talk a little bit about attendance and formatives, so that everybody is clear about that. I know I sent a message on Google Classroom about attendance. And I think most people are up to speed with attendance. How do I say this? The main thing is that you get your formative done on the day that it's assigned. Formatives are also grades. So in the grade book, what you will see is that there are 2 columns for formatives. So right before the progress report goes in, I'm going to go to the formative site and I'm going to see what's your percent average on all the formatives that we've done up to that point. I'm just going to put that percent in. Each formative is like a 5-point scale. So if it seems to me like it was a very thorough, well thought out answer with depth, then that's a 5. A really good answer is like a 4. A 3 is kind of like, I think you spent 2 minutes or 3 minutes on that. 2 is you missed the mark, and a 1 is kind of like, you better get going. If it's a low grade, I'll probably put a comment about what you can do to improve on those formatives. But if you have a bad formative, or if you miss one and have to do it later or something, it's not going to affect you a whole lot because we do them every class day. But you do want to keep up with them. And so I'll put a grade in. The grade for the progress report is a minor grade. And then again, before the report card, there's another column. So like the last day of the 6 weeks for East, I'll just go back to formative again, and I'll take that percentage and I'll put it in. And at that point, it will be a major grade, because we're spending a lot of time working on those formatives and you're putting a lot of thought into them, and I want them to count more than just attendance. So they're for attendance, but I'm also grading them and I'm giving you feedback. So if you haven't been to the formative site, when you go to do your formative today, look and see about the comments and scores and things like that, so that you can check and see how you're doing with formatives. And I'm communicating back with you usually about your ideas. So it's a good way for us to do that. The way that it was originally set up in Blackboard was for you to have a Blackboard journal where you would write those things. But I moved the journal to formative so that I could use it for attendance. I don't want you to have to do 2 things. Does that make sense? Any other questions about attendance policies? You kind of have to think about attendance differently nowadays because we can correct attendance. So as long as you do your formatives on the day before 11:59 on the day, then you're okay. If you see that you were marked absent, but you did your formative later in the day, that's okay. The next day I'm going to change it to remote asynchronous present. RAP. I don't know who thought of that. But RAP, which is the same thing as present. It just means that you did your attendance assignment later in the day. So I correct those the next day. All right, so I get a couple emails sometimes like at 10 o'clock where it's like PM, you marked me absent and I did my formative. Well, you did your formative at 7 o'clock. I'm not sitting there all night long waiting for people to put things in and correct the attendance. So I'm just gonna correct them the next day. And if I don't correct it the next day, then email me and bring it to my attention and I'll fix it for you. Okay, let's move into the material for today because I do wanna let you get started with one of your assignments in groups today. We had some reading to do on characterization and also on setting. I always like to take a little bit of time and go through the reading. I'm not going to lecture because you already read this and made notes, but I do like to go through it in case there are any questions. I like to point out the things that are, super important and significant for you to remember and make sure that you have notes on and things like that. But like I've already mentioned, most of these things are not new terms. We've been studying this stuff for a long time. We're just going to be talking about how is it that we look at it, at the college level. So this chapter is on character. And one of the important things that they talk about is round and flat characters. So it will be important for you to distinguish between round and flat characters. You can think about it as two-dimensional and three-dimensional. Right, so flat is a two-dimensional character, a character that it performs a function, but we don't really know their background. We don't know their backstory. We don't know their motivations. We needed a servant to come into the room and drop off a tray. So that servant, we don't know, who their parents are and what their dreams might be. And that's just a two-dimensional character. So usually the flat characters are characters that are undeveloped because they're just not part of the conflict. They're just not part of the structure of the plot. A round character you can think of as three-dimensional. So a round character is one that we kind of can see the working of their mind. We can see their decision-making. We can see their hopes and dreams and motivations and all of those things. So you can think about that as three-dimensional. They sort of come off the page because they've been made more human. Two-dimensional characters usually don't come off as human because they're just there for some basic purpose. They use the story A and P a lot here, which I know you haven't read, so that's kind of why I like to fill in a little bit. All right, so stock characters are sometimes called archetypal characters. A stock character is the kind of character that you see over and over again, like the damsel in distress. Well, there's one in this story, there's one in that story, there's one in the other story. They're a little different, they have different names, but they basically have the same situation. Heroes, they have different circumstances, but they're basically the same character. The overbearing mother, there's a lot of those archetypal stock characters. A caricature, down here is another term that you need to know. A caricature is like a character that is, nowadays we would say extra. So like super over the top so that it's almost unbelievable, right? Like the super overbearing mother-in-law that goes to the extreme would be a caricature. I think I skipped over foil up here. So I think you've worked with that in the past, but a foil is a character that is sort of a mirror to usually the protagonist, except that there's a key difference between them so that it highlights the main character's qualities. So say we have two characters that are both sons, and one is a horrible son who doesn't pay attention to his parents and treats them, really horribly. And the other one is upstanding, looks after his parents. So when we put them together, the one looks all the more sort of special because he looks after his parents in comparison to the other one, and the other one looks all the more evil because in comparison to the son that's good. So by putting them together, we see their contrasts. That's what they mean by a foil character. Okay, so then they talk about dynamic and static characters. I think you can apply some science terminology here, right? Static means not changing, not moving. So static is a character that doesn't change. They're pretty much the same character at the beginning as they are at the end. A dynamic character, it has some growth. And that's usually the point of the story. So if you can nail down how the protagonist grows in a story, that's usually the point. So there's a realization, there's a growing up, there's some sort of change that a character has as they go through the story that we're supposed to notice and take a lesson from. So usually the dynamic character will be the protagonist, will be dynamic, and static characters are usually minor characters and they don't really change much. They give you some examples from Cinderella. Motivation, I don't think I need to talk about that. Everybody knows what motivation is. And then at the end, there are some things about how would you go about writing about, like if you're going to do a character study of one of the characters in a piece of short fiction. So I know I went through that quickly, but are there any questions from that chapter that I can go over? Okay. Setting is the other part that you were supposed to look at for today. Setting is a little bit tricky because we have to talk about time and place, and those have a lot of moving parts to them. So we talk about the historical, geographical, physical situation, and not all those will be present. Sometimes an author chooses not to reveal a lot about the historical time period. There's some stories where you don't know if they happened in 1500 or 1900. And that's probably because that time period isn't significant to the story. But you have to think about whatever the author does give you. So if the author does establish a geographical location, then it's probably significant in some way with the character or with the conflict or something like that. So also time period. So if we're talking about time period, the thing I want you to remember, and they don't really talk about this in the book, is that when we read a piece from a different time period, like Battle Royal, right? We have to make sure that we're not putting too much of our 2020 mindset and sensibility on that story that was written 50, 60, 100 years ago. We have to try to think in terms of that historical time period. So when we see the N-word, when we see references to women that are outdated, and that kind of thing, it's not fair for us to say, oh, well, the author is misogynistic or racist. Maybe, but maybe also they're a product of their time. And we have to kind of be a little bit forgiving about that and look at the piece as a work from its time. There's no way they could have looked into 2020 and said, oh, Black Lives Matter, I won't use the N-word. So they can't do that. So there's no time machine in writing. So we kind of have to go back and say, okay, setting is important here, because if I don't understand that this person was writing in 1930s Alabama, then I'm probably going to think that they've got, you know, a mindset that's close to mine, and that's not going to be accurate. So the thing about setting in terms of time period is to remember that. Also think about things like seasons. Seasons are very symbolic. We'll probably talk about this later, but you can see in a lot of works when it's springtime, there's youth. When it's summer, there's, you know, like a vibrancy. Winter is basically death. There's a life cycle. So if an author mentions that the setting is taking place in a certain season, sometimes that can be a little signal to you, right? I think they talk about that in the summer reading book, How to Read Literature Like a Professor. Or maybe it's just weather. Historical setting, I just talked about that. You're going to read Yellow Wallpaper for next week. And that takes place in the late 19th century. So that's going to be significant for that time period. And, you know, obviously what happens in that story would not likely happen today because of the circumstances in the late 19th century. Geographical setting is important. This can be tough sometimes because sometimes stories are set in places that are unfamiliar to us. You know, if you read a story that's been translated from Norwegian and it takes place, you know, in Nordic countries, you might not understand the customs of the place. So sometimes you have to do a little research. Sometimes you have to just allow for that shift. Okay, well, these people aren't Americans, or these people have a different cultural situation. Physical setting, I think that's pretty obvious. Physical setting, whether things are indoors or outdoors, whether it's daytime or nighttime, all those things can be symbolic and can affect the characters, right? There's two terms here on the last page, atmosphere and mood. We talk about this quite frequently in literature because we talk about how the setting creates a certain feeling in the reader or a certain feeling for the characters. And so there can be, you know, sort of a sense of suspense or, you know, confusion. And the way that an author can help create that is through setting and the way that they've described it. So there can be a lively atmosphere, you know, if there's a picnic in a brightly lit park under the dappled shade of a tree, you know, and you know, children are on the swings, you can get a sort of, you know, friendly vibe from that. And so I guess maybe the best word when we say, using modern terminology, for atmosphere or mood, it would be like the vibe of the setting. How does it make you feel as a reader? How does it make the characters feel, and how do they interact with that setting? So when we say atmosphere, they kind of differentiate, and this sentence down here is super important. There is a slight difference between atmosphere and mood, although I'm probably not going to be a stickler about it. The atmosphere is kind of like the mental state, how the setting creates a mental state for the characters and also the reader. And then the mood is what it creates in you. So it could be an upbeat scene and it makes you have an emotion of happy, if that makes sense. So it's how the setting creates an emotion in the reader, and what that emotion is the mood. That can sometimes be confusing. And then at the bottom, there's some questions about setting, things to consider when you're looking at a story. Is there anything about setting that you want me to go over and that I didn't? Okay. I wanted to put you in some groups today to start on a characterization assignment, because setting is important, but if you don't nail down character in a story, I think that you can have a serious misreading. So I think that characterization is key. What I'd like to do is go through the characterization assignment with you in the large group, and then put you into some smaller groups to kind of start working through that assignment. So if you scroll down in your Blackboard entry there, you'll see that the characterization assignment is down here at the bottom, and you can just click on that doc and bring it up. I have it on the screen too. So can you see that or no? Yeah, right?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, the chart, okay. Because it popped up and I'm not sure if you can see the doc or whether it's on the screen. Okay. In any case, it looks like you can see it on your screen, but I need to share it on my screen. Where is it going to be? There. Okay. So here's the assignment. You can download it and use it as a doc and then upload it to Blackboard when you're finished with it. But what I did was I set up with a chart. So I want you to choose either 56 to 0, which you read for today, or Battle Royal. Both of those were homework. So you can choose the protagonist in either one. Obviously, you're going to have to identify the protagonist, but it's not hard in those stories. The protagonist is the narrator in both cases. And you can type them in up here, the character and then the title author of the work that you chose. And you can see that along the left over here, there are character elements. So these are the things that we consider. It's 2 pages. So these are the things that we consider when we're looking at analyzing a character. We're looking at their physical qualities, like the size, shape, all those elements of a character's person. Then what are their intangible qualities? I put some like things in parentheses here to consider. What are the character's main internal and external conflicts in the story? What are some contradictions in the character's persona? Because maybe they have two conflicting traits and that's causing them some conflict. What about the character's interaction with the setting? The nature of the character's growth. We said that most protagonists are dynamic characters, so therefore they grow through the course of the story. What's the nature of that protagonist's growth? And then what could the character symbolize, or what could they be a metaphor for, as, in terms of their growth and how they are in the story? What are they supposed to represent? Then you have two columns. So these are the elements that I want you to analyze for. Then you've got a column that says the summary of the elements. So just basically key qualities, you can just list them here. So if you decide, say, for example, that you want to work with the protagonist in 56 to 0, that's going to be Ray, Arthur, Larry, Pete, Fontenot. And so you would think about him and say, go back to the story and say, okay, well, he's got certain qualities. Physically, he's big and sort of clumsy. And so I'd go back through the story and start listing out all of the key physical qualities. So this is like sort of the answer to the question, but you'll see that I put another column over here, and that's to take it to the next level. So what? So he's big and he's clumsy. Why is that important in the story? So we have to take it to that next level for interpretation. So I might say, well, Ray Arthur, Larry Pete is clumsy because his life is clumsy. He's made some decisions in his life that weren't the best for him. And he sort of stumbled through life just like he stumbles after this football game that practically puts him in the hospital. So I'm starting to look for the bigger meaning in the fact that the character has been created the way that he's been created. And that's what goes in this other column over here. So what's the significance of that character trait is what goes here. So if you choose the narrator in Battle Royal, you would do the same thing. How is he described in the story? What are his physical qualities? What are his intangible qualities? So you just go through, you can work it either way. You could go through and sort of like just put in all of the summary sort of answers to the question and then work on the implications, or you can work across, right? You could say, okay, let me just work with the physical qualities. I'm gonna list them here, and then I'm gonna talk over here about why I think that that gives us meaning to the story. Why is that significant? What is that? Why did the author create the character in that way? What's it supposed to signify? And I could work across like that. Any questions on the chart and how it works? All right. I'm going to attempt to put you in some random groups. I can't put you in the groups that you sent to me because I have to do that ahead of time before the meeting starts, but I'm going to make some groups for next time we do this. So it's just going to be random groups for today, but I will go ahead and make some standard groups that, you know, based on your suggestions. So let me try this. I have not done groups yet. I've been in groups on Zoom, but let me try to put you in breakout rooms. What I want you to do in the breakout room is I want for you to, you don't have to agree on the same character, but if you do, then you can kind of start working on your ideas together. I'll pop in and see if there are any questions or anything like that in your groups. Or you could just sort of talk about it as you work through it if you decide to do a different story than the people in your group. But you're turning in your own assignment. So the group part is really just to work through ideas and give me a space to go in and see how you're doing on your assignment before we sign off for today. Okay? So I'm going to put you in your groups for, I guess about 25 minutes or so, 20 minutes, just to get started. This assignment isn't due until Friday. So whatever you get started with today, you can finish on your own before then. But let me go ahead and do the breakout rooms, and I'll pop in and see if there are questions. Salem, do you have a window that says to, okay. Welcome back, everybody. I know it's a little awkward to have groups when you're just thrown in there with people. Hopefully you made the best of it. That's the first time I ever did breakout groups, so I feel like at least it worked. It's good practice for me. I'm gonna go ahead and set up some standard groups so that some of the people that you messaged me are in your group, and then maybe that will help the process next time. I want to spend the last few minutes that we have of class going through the things for this week. So kind of like the rest of the list on Blackboard, and then you can ask me any questions you might have. And then we'll be done for this synchronous session. The characterization chart that you were working on in your groups, that one's due on Friday on Blackboard. So you can just submit the document once you're finished typing in it. Sometimes people have more success turning it into a PDF, but I don't think that's completely necessary. If it is, I'll look at it and message you and let you know, because sometimes it gets scrambled when you upload if it's not a PDF, but that's okay. I don't think you necessarily have to do that. There is a formative for today. Actually, this is a B week, so you've got 3 formatives this week. One today, one on Thursday, and one on Friday. So just make sure that you set a reminder for yourself to go and do your formative for each day so that I can mark you present and all that good stuff. On Thursday, same thing. Obviously, you'll be working on your assignments for this week, but there's a formative on Thursday and then another one on Friday. I just put the same link here because when you log into formative, that day's question will pop up for you. Also on Friday, a reminder to turn in that characterization chart that we were just working on. I will be live on Thursday and Friday, so I'm just gonna open up my office hours. I'll probably send you a notification about that with a link. But on those days, I'm gonna just have my office hours Zoom open, and you can just drop in if you have a question about the chart or any of the assignments for this week. You can just, pop in and ask me if you like. All right, so before next class, which is next Tuesday, I want you to familiarize yourself with the idea of critical lenses. One of the requirements for this course is that we talk about at least 3 critical lenses. So before I start teaching those to you and having you practice with them, I want you to understand what critical lenses are and what we mean by that term, critical lenses. So there's a video, I think the video is like 10 minutes. It's another teacher kind of talking through it from somewhere, I don't know, on YouTube, tons of stuff. And then a slideshow that I made for you that walks you through the concept also. So those 2 things are kind of like just background for this week. Also read and take notes on point of view from your textbook. Everybody has the textbook now, right? Yes. If you don't have your textbook, you need to let me know because I'm not linking to PDFs anymore, but I can if you need me to. So if there's somebody who doesn't have their book, send me an email or something and we'll try to get you one. And then there's 2 selections to read for next time, Yellow Wallpaper and Araby. They're a little shorter than the stories for this week. I would say they're each about 5 pages. So prepare those for next Tuesday, and we'll also be talking about point of view. When you're looking at these 2 new stories, it's important to use what we've been studying about plot and character and setting and analyzing those things as you're reading. So maybe if there's some depth that you wouldn't normally notice, then now it's time to add that to your practice when you're reading and what you're thinking about and where, the direction that the class might go as we discuss those things. All right. If you need another copy of the characterization chart, well, you don't really, because you can just delete it, whatever you put in the chart. But that's pretty much it for this week. Are there any questions on the assignments or anything else I can help you with before we sign off for today?
I got nothing.
Everybody's okay? All right, well, I hope you have a good week. Keep your chin up. If you have questions about assignments, just let me know. It's always better to ask me. If you ask other people, you might get a good answer or you might get their impression of what's supposed to happen. So, communication is good. I'm thinking about you all at home working and hoping that everything's going well for you. So reach out if there are any problems or you need help with anything, okay? All right, I'm gonna end the meeting then. Y'all take care. I'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.